Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of my need-based city sim devlog thing. Finally, last week I managed to get my little AIs to move around and eat and cook and steal each other's beds, but I knew this was way too simple. There had to be a breaking point somewhere. I just hadn't found it yet. And so I started looking into ways I could test if this system was going to hold up. And the first thing that I noticed when I was looking at my prototype was that there was a lot of conditionals. You know, if the AI is at location X, if it's on top of food, if it's hungry, if that, if this, and all of that. So I figured maybe this is going to be a problem when I have more complex actions. So maybe the next step would be to try to take one action and make it as complicated as possible. So I decided to take the cooking action and improve it by breaking it down in many steps. My original idea was to add a fridge, and then the fridge would need to be filled so that the AI can cook. And to do that, I created a market. So the AI would go to the market, buy some food, bring it to the fridge. And then if there's food in the fridge, then the AI can pick it up, put it on the counter, cook, and then finally get its meal. So up until now, I basically had a static list of actions that the NPC can do in the default action. But if I'm going to introduce a whole bunch of stuff like a market and a fridge and table and stuff, I cannot keep all of this hard-coded in my default action. So I decided to reintroduce the concept of advertisement. Basically, all items in the world can have an advertisement class attached to them. And this advertisement will have a list of potential action. And to do this, it first registers itself to the advertisement group in Godot, which allows me to query all the nodes with advertisement easily. Now, in the future, this is going to be much more fancy. You know, the AI is going to have like some kind of memory and it's going to see actual advertisements in the world and it's going to remember them or something like that. But for now, this is going to be plenty good enough. It just allows me to easily iterate over all the advertisements, and then I can query the advertisement for a list of action plan. The idea is that it's a method inside advertisements so that I can kind of dynamically change it. So the fridge, when it's empty, will offer the action plan refill fridge, but when it has food in it, it might offer a list of recipes. And to decide which action to do, the action plan in the advertisement also offers a bunch of potential rewards that will refill the AI needs. And then I use something called a value function. Basically, I score each of the rewards based on the current needs of the AI, and I order it and I pick the action at the top. Now, I mentioned before that being able to interrupt actions is something that's really important for my system, but also something that scares me a lot. So as I was developing this advertisement system, I realized that there could be, events that happen that changes the priority and that these events should abort the current action. But the thing is like, who should change the current action? If the last action in the stack right now is eat, and you're currently updating the eat action every frame, but then a bomb blows up in the restaurant, and you want to start running, should the eat action decide that it's time to start running? That doesn't really make sense. But at the same time, the best choice to decide to switch action would probably be the default action. If something becomes dangerous and the action run away has a much higher score than the current action that you're doing, the default action should be like, hey, switch to this other action. But that means that the default action have to also be updated every frame, just in case you want to abort what you're currently doing. But actually, this can also be generalized. Not only the default action could abort an action. For example, if you're fighting an enemy, so you're in like the fighting an enemy action, and then there's a sub-action that's like melee fight or melee attack or something, and you're currently doing that, but then the enemy decides to start running away or something, well, the fighting an enemy could abort the melee attack and decide to start running after the enemy or start taking out your gun and shoot it. So like any action in your stack could potentially abort the current sub-action and do something else. So what I decided to do is that instead of always calling the last action in the stack and popping it when it's finished, I decided I am always going to call all the action in the stack, starting from the top one and going through to the bottom one. So the way it works is that if the action doesn't do anything when it's called, then we keep going down the stack. But it can also push a new action, even if you're in the middle of the stack. And when it does that, we just drop everything that was below that point and we insert the new action in the stack, and it's like we lost a part of the stack. This is where things can get a little bit dicey, because if I'm not careful, when I discard a whole bunch of actions, I could leave things in a very weird state. This is because usually if you have a complex tasks with lots of steps, you usually keep those steps in some kind of variable or maybe a state machine. You know, if the cooking involves, say, going to the kitchen, opening the fridge door, picking up some food, putting the food on the counter, starting cooking, and then when you're done, bringing the food to the dining table, sitting down and eating, you know, all of those steps, you need a way to keep track of where you are in those steps. But what happens if you get interrupted just when you were about to start cooking? Now there's food on the kitchen counter, and you went to do something else. What do we expect the AI to do in that case? Well, I would expect it to be able to resume where it left off. But remember that everything is dynamic. And so when it comes back to the cooking action, what should happen? Should the action plan remember what state we were in? But the problem is that the state of the world changed. Maybe the NPC isn't in the kitchen anymore, so it first has to go back to the kitchen if it wants to continue cooking. Maybe the food has gone bad, so the whole action cannot happen anymore. So how do I handle those dynamic events? And I think there's a fairly easy solution, but it requires a lot of rigor, basically. Is that I can never keep a state anywhere. No action should ever keep a state. Actions should be completely independent and only based on the state of the world. So the cooking action doesn't remember any kind of steps or variable or state. It just looks at, is there food on the kitchen counter? If yes, am I at the kitchen counter? No, then walk there. Yes, then continue cooking. But this introduces a lot of complexity because, for example, things have to happen in a certain order anyway. And sometimes the same state of the world can be at different step of the project. So for example, if I look at, do I have food in my inventory? Yes, then bring it to the kitchen table. But as soon as I put the food on the kitchen table, suddenly I don't have food in my inventory. So now I'm like, oh, I should go cook some food. But wait, no, there's food on the kitchen table. So I have to make sure the priorities are sorted properly. And that gets really tricky. And as I was making my cooking action more and more complex, I ran into a lot of these little problems. For example, playing one-shot animation, I know that the animation is there when it's playing, but when it's finished playing, I have no way of knowing if I'm before playing the animation or after playing the animation. And I struggle with that quite a lot. Now, all of this was a little bit painful, but none of it was actually deal breaker. After a bit of finagling and carefully organizing my conditionals and stuff, I did manage to get everything working. The AI goes to the market, buys some food, puts it in the fridge, and then chooses from a list of recipes and it starts cooking. So I was like, okay, well, I don't like how it looks, but it still works, which is more than I expected. So maybe I can move another step. So what's the next step for this game? Don't forget, the idea is to eventually have like 100 or 1,000 AI moving around and doing stuff. So I need them to be able to do stuff. But also, I want to try to minimize the number of systems I'm introducing because I know they're going to just add a lot of complexity and they will take me a long time to implement. So I was really considering what could I add. Nothing like saving and loading. I'm not ready yet. Maybe procedural generation. That's just too complicated. Not gonna add enough interest. So I was like, okay, maybe I should think about the asset pipeline. Because in the end, I want this game to have a lot of stuff. Guns, car, bed, houses, apartment, bars, restaurants, bombs. And if I want all of this, I need a fast way to add more stuff. But that's gonna be a story for the next time. So see you all in my next episode. Bye!